Arabi made one of the most impossible claims in spiritual history. There is something about you that cannot be lost, damaged, improved, or changed in any way. Not your personality, not your body, not your memories or achievements. Something so basic to what you are that you've never even noticed it. And recognizing this one thing ends the fear of loss forever. This isn't philosophical comfort or spiritual platitudes. This is Arabi's most radical insight about the nature of human identity, a discovery so profound that it challenges everything you think you know about yourself and what it means to be human. Think about your deepest fears for a moment. The fear of losing someone you love, the fear of losing your health, your financial security, your mental faculties, the fear of losing your youth, your attractiveness, your relevance, the fear of losing your purpose, your faith, your sense of who you are. All of human suffering, according to Arabi, stems from one fundamental misunderstanding. We believe that what we really are can be threatened, diminished, or lost. We spend our entire lives trying to protect, preserve, and enhance what we think is our true self. But what if everything you're trying to protect isn't actually you at all? Arabi's insight came from years of direct spiritual investigation into the nature of consciousness itself. Unlike philosophers who reasoned about identity from a distance, Arabi looked directly into his own experience of being aware, being present, being alive. And what he found there revolutionized his understanding of what it means to be human. He discovered that when you look closely into your own direct experience, you can find thoughts, emotions, sensations, perceptions, memories, and all kinds of mental content. But underneath all of this changing content, there's something that remains absolutely constant: the simple fact of being aware itself. This awareness isn't something you have, like a possession or a quality. It's what you fundamentally are. It's not something that comes and goes. It's stronger or weaker, better or worse. It's the unchanging background against which all change appears. Think about it this way. Right now, you're aware of reading these words. But notice that the same awareness that's reading these words was present when you were a child, aware of playing in the sandbox. The same awareness that knows your current thoughts was there knowing your thoughts as a teenager, as a young adult, throughout every phase of your life. Your body has completely changed since you are 7 years old. Your thoughts, beliefs, and personality have evolved dramatically. Your circumstances, relationships, and life situation are completely different. But the awareness that knows all of these changes, that pure consciousness that's reading these words right now, is exactly the same as it was when you were 7. Arabi called this unchanging awareness your essential self, not the self you think you are, but the self you actually are. And here's his impossible claim. This essential self cannot be damaged by any experience, cannot be improved by any achievement, cannot be diminished by any failure, and cannot be lost under any circumstances. Why? Because it's not an object that can be affected by change. It's the very subject that's aware of all change. It's like space itself. You can move furniture around in a room, but the space that contains the furniture remains completely unaffected by whatever happens within. But here's where Arabi's teaching becomes truly radical. He claimed that most people live their entire lives completely identified with the furniture while ignoring the space. They think they are their thoughts, emotions, body, personality, history, and circumstances. They spend all their energy trying to rearrange the furniture, trying to make it more comfortable, more secure, more impressive. But what they really are, this pure awareness, this essential consciousness, remains completely unaffected by whatever happens to the furniture. You could lose your job, your health, your relationships, even your memories, and what you really are would be completely untouched. This doesn't mean that losing these things wouldn't be painful or challenging. The pain is real, The grief is real. The difficulty is real. But Arabi pointed out that even the awareness of pain, grief, and difficulty remains completely stable and unaffected by what it's aware of. It's like watching a movie. The movie might be tragic, terrifying, or heartbreaking, and you might feel genuine emotions in response to what you're watching. But the screen on which the movie appears is never actually damaged by even the most violent scenes. The screen remains pristine, whether it's displaying explosions or love scenes, tragedies or comedies. Arabi taught that you are like the screen of consciousness on which the movie of your life appears. The movie might be difficult, but what you really are, the awareness in which all experience appears, is never actually threatened by anything that happens in your life. But if this is true, why do we suffer so much from the fear of loss? Why does it feel like our very existence is threatened when we face major changes or difficulties? Arabi explained that we suffer because we've been conditioned to identify completely with the content of consciousness while ignoring consciousness itself. We think we are our thoughts instead of recognizing that we are what's aware of thoughts. We think we are our emotions instead of recognizing that we are what experiences emotions. We think we are our bodies instead of recognizing that we are what's aware of bodily sensations. This case of mistaken identity is what creates all psychological suffering. When you think you are your thoughts, then disturbing thoughts feel like threats to your very existence. When you think you are your emotions, then negative emotions feel like they're destroying who you are. When you think you are your circumstances, then changing circumstances feel like existential threats. But when you recognize what you really are, this unchanging awareness that's present in every experience, then you realize that no experience, no matter how challenging, can actually threaten or damage your essential nature. Arabi wasn't suggesting that you should become indifferent to life or stop caring about your relationships, health, and circumstances. He was pointing out that when you know what you really are, you can engage fully with life without the underlying terror that what you are might be damaged or lost. It's like the difference between watching a movie when you think you're actually inside the movie versus watching when you know you're safely seated in the theater. When you think you're in the movie, every threat feels real and terrifying. When you know you're in the theater, you can experience the full emotional impact of the story without actually being endangered by it. Modern neuroscience has begun to validate some of Arabi's insights about consciousness. Research shows that there's a fundamental distinction between the contents of consciousness, thoughts, emotions, sensations, and consciousness itself. Studies of people in deep meditative states show that it's possible to experience pure awareness without any particular content. Brain imaging studies suggest that this pure awareness corresponds to a state with a default mode network. The brain regions associated with self-referential thinking and personal identity becomes much less active. In these states, people report experiencing themselves as pure consciousness rather than as a particular personality or individual. But for Arabi, the scientific validation was less important than the practical implications. When you recognize what you really are, the entire foundation of psychological suffering begins to shift. Instead of trying to protect, improve, or preserve what you think you are, you can rest in the recognition of what you actually are, something that needs no protection because it cannot be threatened, no improvement because it's already complete, no preservation because it's inherently indestructible. This recognition doesn't happen through thinking about it or believing it intellectually. Arabi taught specific practices for directly investigating your own experience of being aware. The most direct approach he suggested was simply asking yourself, "What am I?" and looking directly into your immediate experience for the answer, not asking, "Who am I?" which tends to generate answers like "I'm a teacher, a parent, a spiritual seeker." But what am I? What is the actual nature of this awareness that's asking the question? When you look directly, Arabi promised, you won't find a thing. You won't find an object that can be described, improved, or lost. You'll find the very capacity for experience itself, open, aware, present, and completely unaffected by whatever appears within it. This recognition isn't a one-time event. Arabi taught that it needs to be refreshed repeatedly as we continue, to unconsciously identify with the changing contents of experience. But each time you recognize what you really are, the fear of loss loses a little more of its grip. Eventually, Arabi suggested, this recognition becomes so stable that you live from the understanding that what you are cannot be threatened. You still care about your health, your relationships, your circumstances, but you care from a place of freedom rather than fear, from love rather than attachment, from wisdom rather than unconscious identification. This is Arabi's gift to anyone who suffers from the fear of loss. The recognition that what you really are is so fundamental, so basic, so essential, that losing it would be impossible. You can lose everything else, but you cannot lose the awareness that knows you've lost it. You cannot lose the consciousness that experiences loss itself. And in that recognition, according to Arabi, lies the end of existential fear and the beginning of genuine freedom. Because when you know that what you are cannot be lost, you're free to live fully, love completely, and engage wholeheartedly with whatever life brings, knowing that your essential nature remains forever untouchable.